I'd like to introduce Simon to you. Simon would be one of my idols for many years, and I'm thrilled to have Simon join us today. So Simon, today you're going to talk about posture, movement, breathing, and mental control. And I'm highly interested in listening to what you have to say. But first, I'd like to hear a little bit about you. So can you tell me a little bit about your area of healing?
It's a pleasure to be here, Sarah. Thank you very much for your interest in my work. I guess if I have to think about my area of healing, the thing I'm most passionate about fixing with people is aging. It's like my aim is to create longevity and to counter the effects of aging. And so my personal aim is to die as young as possible, as late as possible. And so this is what I want to work with. And I use posture, movement, breathing, and mental control to achieve this. A little bit of diet as well, and this sort of thing.
That sounds incredible. Thank you. So can I ask what led you to this area?
Well, funnily enough, it's something to do with the color of my hair, something to do with the wrinkles on my face a little bit. Look, you know, I really enjoy life, and I love going to dance parties, and many of my friends are children and people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and you know, we run intensive trainings where a lot of the people are in their 20s and 30s, and I like to party with them and I like to have fun. And some things in my life have limited me from the enjoyment that I like. So I've had quite a few injuries over the years, musculoskeletal injuries resulting from stupid accidents. Like when I was 20, I did a backflip in a gymnastics class and I broke my neck and severely damaged my spine. You know, at 15, I ruptured my lungs in a chemical explosion. I had to fix that. At 25, I was dancing at a nightclub and someone tripped on my thigh and I dislocated my knee. I got a large piece of metal inserted into my abdomen when I was 30 in India. I've been in about 4 or 5 car accidents. I fell off a building when I was about 50 and I broke my arms in a couple of places and fractured my hips. And, you know, I've done pretty good at trying to fix everything. But these musculoskeletal injuries, they healed pretty good, but not as good as I'd liked. So I tried to work out ways of fixing myself better. I've been pretty good at countering the physiological changes that happen to us as you get older. I've had a couple of diseases like dengue fever was probably the worst disease I had. But for most part, I've just been trying to work to keep myself young and healthy because I love life. And I think on a mental level, it's the attitude of loving life that's something we want to foster in everyone. Many people age because they just actually don't enjoy being here and they have the wrong approach. That's why I call what I do something to do with posture, movement, breathing, and mental control. And so it's this that I want to share, and that's probably the reasons why I came to it.
I think I'm flabbergasted. Simon, you've had so many physical injuries. And when I'm thinking about your resilience, that will be a word that really comes to mind. Your resilience, not only physically, but also mental control. That is a beautiful example of living what it is that you're talking about. Can you share one thing that you can recommend that we can use right now to help us be healthy?
I guess if I wanted to pick one quick sentence, and I can certainly elaborate on it later, but one quick thing to do, I think, is to teach people and encourage people to regularly enter the meditative state. And I have to really describe what I mean by the meditative state. And the meditative state can be either in a stationary position or a dynamic, active practice, or a combination of the two. But for most people, they get the best results if they enter the meditative state while doing some sort of dynamic practice. Because what we're trying to do, I think, is to help people for longevity, to help people cure this disease we call age. You have to address people's physical body, their physiological body and their mental body. I mean, when I say those things, I mean the physical body is addressing things like people's muscles and bones and joints. And then things like strength, flexibility, and functional ability. Then people's physiological body is people's energy levels, the health of their internal organs, especially those to do with digestion, immunity, and reproduction, regeneration of their cells. And then also things like encouraging good blood flow, healthy blood flow, and a healthy nervous system with a dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest, rejuvenation, relaxation, regeneration mode. And so that's the physiological well-being. And then the mental well-being is the ability to have a person who can think clearly, focused, sharp, bright, but also on a more emotional level, perhaps, to be able to choose happiness as their default mode of being and to have some sort of positive outlook. And these things make a big difference for health. So I believe we have to address this aging problem with practices that will address all those three things. And so when I say meditation, the way most people hear it, is not going to work for most people because it's too static. And so people's joints will have problems after sitting too long. It's also not going to make people's blood flow very effectively. It's not impossible, but to have meditation work to really encourage healthy circulation, you have to be like one of those Tibetan monks, someone who can sit naked in the snow and stay warm. And that's what real meditation, I believe, is. I don't think it's really properly meditation if you're just sitting in a room in a typical Western country and it's wintertime and you realize that your fingers and toes have gone cold. Because if we're talking about meditation, the only translation you have in Sanskrit, for example, is the word yoga. And yoga means connection. So you're not really connected if the amount of blood in your fingers is not the same as the amount of blood that might be circulating through your heart. So what we want for perfect health is to encourage circulatory flow. But the way most people encourage circulatory flow is by making their heart beat faster. But if you make your heart beat faster, that's a sign of stimulating your sympathetic nervous system, which is AKA the flight, fight, fear, and freeze response, which doesn't sound like something that's going to engender longevity, and it certainly doesn't. So what I believe we need to do is foster a way of being, which I call true meditation, which is best and easiest done if it's dynamic, which will help people maintain a healthy musculoskeletal system, so their joints and their muscles will stay functional and they won't end up with joint problems and things which limit people. But also they're going to encourage a healthy physiology, which means they're going to have a good circulation happening. Blood will flow very easily, but without the heart racing. And really then with the dominance of the parasympathetic nervous system, rest, rejuvenation, relaxation, regeneration, healthy immunity, healthy digestion, healthy regeneration of cells. And at the same time, they must enjoy the practice. It's not enough to have a practice which is going to be good for you. So after you feel like you've done something that's good for yourself, but it wasn't very pleasant. It must be a practice which is enjoyable to do at the time. So this is what I'm trying to share with people. And, I've got general ideas. It's best done on a one-on-one prescription level, but really there's probably better ways than most people are trying to do it. So I have a general method as well, and I'll just describe that if you like.
Yeah, I'd love to hear a little bit more. But I'm also interested, you talked about mindset, and I can hear that there's a strong mindset that's coming from you. And in your mental control, all of this becomes possible when you change your mindset. What's twofold of this question? Has your mindset always been along this direction? And the second part of my question is, what's a recommendation or what's a method that you would recommend for people to change their mindset?
Okay. It's my mindset, I've been lucky to have since a very early age, and I can probably thank my mother for this, to to always be positive and generally feel like things are on the up.
Yeah.
But it's not always like this. So there was a time in my life when I got very depressed. It was only once. It was when I had like a major relationship breakup, and I was for a couple of months just thinking that life had no purpose and there was no meaning anymore, and I couldn't see the brightness in things. And
Yeah.
it lasted for a couple of months until at one point, almost like in a flash, I realized the thing that my mother had somehow instilled in me from an early age, which is something which is written all through the yoga texts. Not very clearly, admittedly, but it's this thing which is sometimes talked about in terms of contentment, very lamely said as the loose translation of what in Sanskrit they called santosha. I believe this term is better translated as meaning you are the one in control of how you feel. That happiness is your choice, not something you wait for. And so this came to me in a flash after a couple of months of depression, and it made me remember that that's how I've been all my life. That no matter how, and my father also was very instrumental in giving me this as well. So what we can do as much as possible is realize that, there's many different ways of saying it, but one of the ways is that if you see the glass half full, are you going to be happy there's half a glass of water, or sad it's half empty? And it's a choice. It's always a choice. And one of the ways you can make this a little bit easier is to consider the possibility, which I once dwelled on when a friend of mine was about to commit suicide. And he tried and failed. And afterwards, I could have let him pass, or I could have saved his life. And while I was in the process of discussing with him whether I should let him go or not, he was saying how in an infinity of time, when life has no meaning, what's the difference if you die in 10 years or 100 years or 1,000 years? And I went, well, mathematically, in an infinity of time, 10 over infinity is the same as 100 over infinity as 1,000 over infinity. It doesn't make any difference. In which case he's right. If life has no meaning, then die when you feel like it. But it didn't occur to me until after this interaction that that's actually not what I believe. I believe that life has a meaning, that we're here for a purpose. Now, I can't rationally prove that, and he can't rationally prove that life has no meaning. So since it's unprovable in our world, you can really make an arbitrary choice. But if you assume that life has a meaning, there's a lot better things you can do with it. And then you can't then say it's worth dying. So I would like to suggest to people that since you cannot prove either way that life has a meaning or not, that it's an article of faith, why not assume life does have a meaning, and you can even ascribe some meanings to it, and then life is worth living. And so the meaning that I ascribe to life is the one that was given to me by my yoga teachers. And yoga is a word from India, but I've been lucky enough to have my first teachings from, I believe, my parents, which were yoga. But also I had a Tibetan Lama when I was 17, a man from Tibet. Then I did my first sort of intensive training with Japanese teachers, Japanese yogis, Zen masters, and then Indian teachers. And then I've also had Chinese teachers, all of whom seem to be teaching what we think of as yoga. And so yoga means connection, and they all talked about connection. And they all talked, even the Aboriginal, Indigenous Australian people had, things they talked about to me, and I lived with Indigenous Australians for some time. And they all talk about this connection. And the way I see it is that we're living in a connected place, a connected world. Modern physics says it, that everything is connected. The ancient wisdoms all said that we're living in a connected world. And that when we look at the population of the planet, every person is really related to everyone else.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I are 15th, second cousins from our third mother's aunts. You can find the relationship.
Yeah.
If we all acknowledge that all humans are eventually related, and we're also related to the animals, and to the trees and the plants and the earth, to recognize this connection is what I'll call yoga. To recognize we're all connected actually is not the purpose, but actually to act as if we are connected, I believe, is a good purpose. So my purpose in life, I put it in 3 ways. 1, be thankful that we have a life. Enjoy your life. 2, look after your body, because it's the only one we've got.
Yeah.
It's our temple. 3, help other people enjoy their lives. And when you start helping other people enjoy their lives, you're doing the number one thing that the 2 most connected individuals in the world that we can really see that connection in, and you'd appreciate this perhaps, is when a mother gives birth to a child. For 9 months before that, she feels the child was part of her, was one with her. And when the baby comes out, it still feels like one with her. My mother still treats me like I'm 6 years old. I love her.
Yeah.
It never changes. And as a father, I also feel this connection with my children. It's not as strong, I don't believe, as what a mother has it. We didn't have that thing inside us. But I believe that when I see the way the mother of my children treated the kids, and I'm sure the way you treated yours, is there's that real sense of sharing good energy and loving information with that child. And if you want to communicate in the world, to connect with someone in the world, the best way of doing it is by sharing good energy and loving information. Like if you're trying to make your point across to someone, you can't shout at them. You can't steal off them. You have to be generous with your time and your energy, and you have to talk lovingly to them. So I believe the pathway to recognizing that the world is a connected place and to having purpose for all of our lives is to share good energy and loving information. But people are not going to do this in the world unless they first live it within themselves.
Yeah.
And to share good energy and loving information inside yourself, we do that by encouraging the flow of blood in our body, because blood is what carries the information, the energy, the good energy inside our body. And I call it good energy because it's the energy which is what we want to circulate, is not blood circulating by heart racing, because heart racing is a sign of ill health most of the time. And what we want is to have that real relaxation mode happening in our body. That relaxation mode is that parasympathetic nervous system dominance over the sympathetic nervous system dominance. Because in the parasympathetic nervous system state, you've got a dominance of the emotions of love, peace, safety, trust.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in the flight or fight response, the sympathetic nervous system, the dominant emotions will be that of fear, anger, aggression, lack of safety, lack of trust. So when you have healthy circulatory flow going inside your body, where the blood is really circulating well, but the heart is not racing fast at all, like you'd be a person who could walk out into the snow and your fingers are warm and someone says to you, aren't you cold? You go, no, I've got good circulation. Like the yogi in Tibet who sits naked in the snow.
Mm.
And so this, I believe, is the number one way that we can get people to really connect with themselves. And once they've connected with themselves, instantly they start to enjoy life.
Yeah.
And once they've enjoyed life, that's the first satisfaction of the criterion of my purpose for life. Enjoy your life. Look after your body because you're doing it at the same time. And then once you've got happiness within yourself and a healthy body to act with it, then it's really easy to help other people and do that final step of really sharing good energy and information, like you as a mother share with your children, we can all share it with the rest of the world. And then the world would be a better place.
Yeah.
And so I think if the purpose of your life, if the meaning of life is just to make this life we're living in better for other people, that's a good purpose. And if it means you have to make it better for yourself first, that to me is only logical. Because someone who is not happy is not as an effective worker, their health is never as good, they're not effective at doing anything. So really choosing happiness in your own life and learning to enjoy your life is not selfish. It's a responsibility that we all have to help make the world a better place. And
It sounds yeah. So it sounds a little bit like that aeroplane. You put the mask on yourself first
yes.
before you give it to the child.
I often talk about airplane yoga for that
Oh,
same
okay.
reason.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because it's the important thing. You must look after yourself before you can be of any help to anyone else. And I think this is then giving you the possibility of giving yourself love. It's really important. And, you know, in Australia, there's this unfortunate thing. I mean, Australia is a wonderful place, but there's this thing about people who say to you, you just love yourself, don't you? You go, yes, I do. If
Yeah.
we don't love ourselves, who's going to love us?
Yeah.
How useful. So take some time every day to show some love to yourself. Get good at giving love by practicing on yourself, and then it's easier to share with others.
I think we see that as well when we're looking at a society maybe that doesn't have that sense of self-love. And if you're looking at the posture, the movement, the breathing, and the mental control, you talked about diet there as well. And when you've got that sense of self, you want to put good things into your body. You want to breathe clean air. Do you want to talk a little bit further about that as well?
I was fortunate to get sick. I forgot actually, one major sickness I got was in my early 20s when I spent about 5 years looking after myself.
Okay.
Up until I was 17, I was being looked after by my mum.
Okay.
Bless her, and she cooked me very nice food and looked after me very well. But I got a bit cocky at 17. I said, I want to look after myself. I'm going to move out of home. And I went to live in the Aboriginal housing estate in Redfern near Sydney University. And we were the only non-Indigenous house in Everleigh Street in Redfern. It was a really wonderful experience. I got to meet some of the most wonderful people in my life. But I really wasn't financially suited to live away from home. So we used to live off the worst foods, really just, rubbish that was left at the end of shops closing at night. And then I also had a job at a local cinema, and I would eat chocolate and chips for dinner every night because it was free food in my student mentality.
Yes.
And by the time I got to 22, my health started to decline. And at 23, I just had a full shutdown. And I collapsed while teaching a class. And the doctors who eventually, got me back together a little bit said that I had major indications of colitis, diverticulitis, and I probably needed some sort of barium enema and maybe possibly having bits of my intestine cut surgically out to try and fix up the mess that I'd made.
Okay.
And at the time I went, oh, look, that doesn't sound nice.
Yeah.
And at the time I was teaching biology to medical students. And in my cockiness, I thought, well, I don't need to be told anything by doctors. I teach doctors. I wasn't teaching doctors. I was teaching biology 1 to medical students. But I thought I'd look after my own health. So I embarked upon the dietary pathway to fix my health. And I probably caused more damage than good in the first couple of years, trying various types of diets, various types of fasting regimes. But it did set me on a good path. And I was lucky enough that my body would adapt to a new set of diets. It's much harder to do if you're 50 or 60 years old.
Yeah.
But luckily doing this when I was 22 or 23, I think I started my first fasting regimes, that I could actually then eventually, within a few years, adopt a diet which was totally vegan for the last, 40 odd years. And in the last 35 years, I've been predominantly living off just fruit, salad, vegetables, all mostly raw, and at times periods of several years where it was just a totally live food diet, emphasizing fresh sprouted foods, some fermented foods. And that's something which has been with me for many decades now, and it made a big difference. Also, in conjunction with all that, a lot of fasting. I'm about to start fasting again tomorrow. I did a week of juice fasting a few weeks ago. I like to do once a year a little bit of a water fast as well, but often juice fasts are much easier, so and also dry fasts, so often each day I might go up to 15 to 20 hours every day dry, don't drink or eat anything. So that for most people is called intermittent fasting. Well, I do that every day.
Okay.
Every day, one meal a day usually, which is from about 6 o'clock at night.
Okay. And can you tell me how that relates to your breaths? I know when I've watched you, and I've been following you and Yoga Synergy for quite a long time now, probably about 10 years or more now. And your understanding in your practice of pranayama is absolutely sensational. Can you talk a little bit about the breath?
Yes, certainly. The link between breathing and diet relates the fact that most food that most people eat leaves a very acidic residue in your body. And it's only a few foods, which are predominantly fruit, salad, and vegetables, which actually leave a more alkaline residue in your body. Your body generally likes to be fairly neutral. And neutral that's when the enzymes work best in your body. That's when your cells function best, right? But if the body becomes too alkaline, it will complain.
Mm-hmm.
And it complains in terms of the nervous system by hyperstimulating the nervous system. It also, if it becomes too alkaline, it will cause blood vessels to shut down in the brain. And it also shuts down the entry of oxygen from the oxyhemoglobin into your body cells. If your body becomes too acidic, it will also cause problems. But in the beginning, when the body becomes a little bit acidic, what it does is it causes the blood vessels to the brain to open up. It causes the nervous system to calm down. It causes the oxygen transport from oxyhemoglobin, the red pigment in the blood cells, to the body cells to increase. And when oxygen gets into cells, your metabolism of sugar, the burning of your sugar as a fuel, will be up to 19 times more efficient. So what we want is to not get too alkaline, not get too acid, but be just right in the body. And so the body will level your acid alkaline base levels, using things like how you excrete from your kidney. It will also regulate it by what you choose to eat and also how you breathe. And so if you breathe too much, hyperventilation, more breath than you actually need, every in-breath, people think I'm getting more oxygen, but that's not important. It's that for every in-breath you make, you breathe out carbon dioxide. And so the more you breathe, the more you get rid of carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide, when it's inside our body, actually is our friend. Carbon dioxide is a friend to the trees. Carbon dioxide is a friend to our bodies. It, to me, is a travesty in this world that many people think that carbon dioxide is our enemies, and they're cutting down the trees. And they're talking about all sorts of weird politics about carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide in our blood becomes carbonic acid, and it is there to calm the nervous system, promote blood flow to the brain by expanding our blood vessels. It promotes an opening of the bronchial tubes, which means you get better oxygen transfer from your lungs into your blood, and it promotes a calming of the nervous system. I said that already, I think, and it also promotes a much easier entry of oxygen into your cells. We want carbon dioxide, so better breathe less, not breathe more.
Can you show a practice of how to breathe?
I can, but maybe I'll finish saying what I'm going to say first,
Please.
if possible.
Yes.
So the on the other level, if people get listless and they get draining of energy, then what people often think of is, I've got no energy, I don't feel clear in my head, I'm stressed, I'm not feeling good. When their nervous system is too frail, when their brain is not getting enough blood, when they're not having energy, their immediate thought is, I need to eat some food.
Mm.
And the best food for those people is high protein food, heavy food, dense food. And that dense food has a very highly acidic nature to it. So when it comes inside their body, within a very short time, they feel much better now. Food does not work inside you as quickly as people think in terms of nutrition. They don't eat food and go, I feel great, because they've absorbed the nutrients. They feel good because the food has affected their pH level.
Mm-hmm.
So when you are feeling less blood to the brain, hypersensitive nerves, when you're feeling no energy, you have two choices. You either have to get more acidic by eating acidic foods, or you become more acidic by breathing less than normal. Breathing less than normal is quite difficult.
Yeah.
So you asked me to do it.
Yeah.
How do I learn to do it?
How would, for a general public that doesn't have your skill,
Yes.
how would I
How
start
do you do
this?
it?
Yeah.
The best path to breathing less than normal is to learn to meditate.
Mm-hmm.
Now, meditation is one of those places which most people associate with sitting still. And so when you're sitting still, I think many people have experienced it who've tried meditation, that there comes a point where you suddenly go, I don't think I've breathed for ages. And that's the point when meditation actually is beginning. It's not that you don't breathe, you're just breathing so little that other people can't hear it, and not even you can hear it sometimes. It's almost like your skin is breathing. And in the yogic text, that's called Kevala Kumbhaka, the automatic suspension of the breath. It's that moment that takes your breath away.
Mm-hmm.
So the expression goes. In fact, BKS Iyengar, who was one of my amazing teachers, said that samadhi, that enlightenment moment, happens to everyone on a daily basis. But it only happens in glimmering moments. It's that moment like when you're looking, he said, at a really beautiful sunset or sunrise, and you think, oh my God, what a beautiful sunset.
Mm.
It was that moment just before you thought it.
Yeah.
And that's that moment that took your breath away. And so what we want is to create moments like this that go a bit more, where you're totally engaged. And what I can do, if you like, is explain how to get to this meditative state, but when you're doing something active. Because most people, if they just do seated meditation, that will mean they're breathing not so much, but they're not doing much good for their body. But if you want to get the benefits of what we consider in yoga to be pranayama, the art of breathing less than normal, what you can do is exercise and enter the meditative state. Because you see, when someone is doing something like running, if they can run fast and hardly breathe at all, you call them a fit person, fit and healthy. But if they walk slowly and they're panting and their heart's racing while they're walking slowly, they go, you go, oh, that person's really sick. So what we want is to be a person who exercises but breathes like someone who's sitting meditating. Now, that means that two things. Do not exercise and try and breathe more. Exercise and relax. While you're exercising, tense less, stretch less, breathe less, think less, make it less stressful. And as you make the exercise less stressful, and you remind yourself the things that it takes to just breathe naturally, invariably, you'll be doing more activity than normal, which does require more energy and does require more air. But because you've stopped over breathing, it gives you the net effect of breathing less than you would normally be doing. That's the simplest way that someone can achieve the benefits of breathing less without doing complicated exercises like I practice. So like this morning, my practice was to do 1 breath in, 1 minute, 1 breath out, 1 minute.
Yeah.
So I go breathe in 1 minute, breathe out 1 minute, and I repeat that for some time. It's too hard to teach that.
Yeah.
But unless you can breathe less than 1 full breath, 1 breath in 1 minute at rest, then you might as well just do meditation. Because when you're sitting at rest in a meditative state, you breathe the equivalent of 1 full breath per minute. Most people do it by doing 10 little breaths in 1 minute, or 20 even smaller breaths of a couple of 100 mils each. It's good for you, but it's not as good as breathing naturally while exercising. That's my short answer.
Okay. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about what it means for dynamic movement? I've got this image of, I'm in Victoria at the moment and all the gyms are closed. And I've got this image of running on a treadmill and breathing, and I'm thinking running on the treadmill and relaxing while I'm breathing. How does that work from a practical perspective?
Okay. Well, for that, I'd have to explain what I mean by entering
Yeah.
the meditative state. And so the meditative state is one which has 5 important things in it. The first thing is that the meditative state must be a sustainable state. There's no point to enter meditation in an activity that you can only do for 30 seconds or even 1 minute. It has to be something which, according to the yoga text, because yoga and meditation really are the same thing, is that the activity must be sustainable up to about, say, 3 hours. That's what the text would suggest. So running is probably not the best activity for most people. Maybe elite athletes can do it, and I know some who can run for 3 or 4 hours, and they do it in a very relaxed meditative state, which they call being in the zone or being in flow. It's that state, in the zone, in flow, in meditation, that's what we want. Now, you can't be in a meditative state doing push-ups or chin-ups either, because most people are lucky if they can do 10 of either. Some athletes can do 20 or 100 or more, but even that's limiting. So you have to pick an activity which is sustainable. That's number 1. Yeah. Second thing for the meditative state is that it has to be engaging. Now, engaging means it must be something which is going to be not boring, because your mind will drift off, but not too exciting because it becomes stressful. So it has to be interesting enough to engage your mind, but not to stress you out, not too interesting. It has to be calming enough to keep you in the parasympathetically dominant state, but not too boring. And when we see that on a brainwave CAT scan type analysis, when they do electromagnetic resonance imaging of the brain and stuff like this, and check out what's happening in people who do profound and proficient meditation, they see coherent synchronous brainwave patterns. It becomes like a one-pointed activity. Now, it doesn't have to be just thinking of one thing, but it might be like a conductor of an orchestra. Each player will play an instrument, but the conductor organizes them all. So you might be doing an activity, which might be your hands might be doing one thing, your elbows doing something else. And every part of the body is doing something different, but it's all orchestrated as one. So it has to be one-pointed. And also what they've seen when they study people's brains in the meditative state. And this, incidentally, was studies that they first started to do on people who were working with psychedelic drugs in the recent studies at, say, Johns Hopkins University in the last 10 years, when they were allowed to re-experiment with things like DMT, LSD, psilocybin, stuff that was experimented on in the 1960s, but there was a ban on it. And in the last 10 years, they've started experimenting again with more modern techniques. And they found that people on psychedelic drugs entered a state which they said they've never seen this brainwave state. It's a unique brainwave state. They've only ever seen it in profound and proficient meditators. And that's why my Tibetan Lama, when I was 17, he said to me, you can get the enlightenment state, this samadhi, this meditative supreme state, in 4 ways. You can get it either by long time meditation, which is the best way. You can also get it through very profound pranayama techniques.
Mm-hmm.
You can also get it through Shaktipat, where you get just given it when a great guru touches you, and usually then it's only transitory, or through psychedelic drugs, which is also usually transitory. But he said he was given psychedelic drugs in Tibet once or twice to help him access doorways in the brain, which would help him see possibilities that were otherwise hard to find by himself. But once those doorways were open, he was always available to go to them.
Okay.
Okay, so this special place is a place where your default center has been switched off. And the default center, the default network in the brain, is one where your mind no longer time travels. The default network is a place you go to when, say, for example, you're at a bus stop waiting for a bus, but you don't know how long before the bus comes. Is it coming in 30 seconds or 30 minutes? You can't just write a book. You can't read a book. You can't, do something like that. So your mind sort of looks for the bus, but at the same time drifts off, starts thinking about what I did yesterday, what I'm going to do tomorrow. It's your time traveling center. That switches off when you're in a meditative state. And also when you drift off at the bus stop, you start thinking about how your boss is at work to you, and any inequality maybe, or maybe how your relationship is not going exactly as you want, or maybe how your children, they need a bit more of this or a bit more of that. You start thinking about the separation in your life between other people. And so what happens is, in your meditative state, that goes away. All you think of is connection. And the person in the meditative state and on psychedelic drugs feels totally connected to everything in the present moment. It's be here, be now, and be totally connected. And so in a meditative activity, you'd be totally in the here and now with that activity, totally connected to it. So this is what I mean by the second part of what I call the 5 stages of meditation. Number 1, sustainability. Number 2, engagement with all those things I mentioned then. The next thing is it must be effortless. Effortless means there must be no sense of discomfort in the body, no sense of pain, no sense of suffering, no sense of risk of injury, and no threat to the body at all on a physical, physiological, or mental level. So that means really what you want is it can't be a feeling of stretching. Because as soon as you feel a stretch in the body, which is what many people look for in their yoga practice, the body says something's wrong. A lot of stretch is stretch reflex. You see, when you come to the limit of your range of motion, the body will start to tell you it feels a stretch, which means you won't be able to go much further, which means your range is restricted. And for anyone who does martial arts, you know that if you straighten your elbow fully in martial arts, it's an invitation for someone to break the elbow. Same with your knee. You don't want to lock your joints because it restricts your freedom. And once your freedom is restricted physically, mentally, it's also restricted as well. And that doesn't feel nice. And so also when stretch comes, the sensation that will come just a little bit further is pain. And just a little bit after that is injury. So you want to avoid stretch. I recommend that anyone who does yoga only moves to the range where they feel length in their muscle, but not stretch. It's a difference. Imagine if you bend your elbow to cross your arms, it doesn't feel like a stretch, does it? But if you go like this, you can't actually stretch it more. But imagine if you bend your elbow and you go, oh, gee, that's a strong elbow stretch. Your next thought would be, something must be wrong with my elbow. So at a subconscious level, stretch is perceived by the body to be something's wrong. So my recommendation, if you want a meditative state, doing a yoga practice or gymnastics or anything, avoid the feeling of stretch. And also, if you want to be in a meditative state, avoid anything which makes your muscles feel tensed. Because muscle tension beyond, say, 15 to 25% of the maximal amount of muscle can tense restricts blood flow. So it inhibits circulation of good energy, but it also will cause a stimulation of your flight or fight response. Because imagine if you picked up something, say you picked up something simple, like I pick up this, doesn't weigh much. It's a piece of paper. It's a roll like this. But imagine, unbeknownst to me, it was made of plutonium, which is twice as heavy as lead. And I go pick it up and I feel my back's about to do something funny because it was heavier than I expected. I felt tension straight away. Suddenly, if something feels heavier than you expected and you feel the tension as opposed to feeling nothing, you suddenly go, oh, I better be careful for my back or my arm. It could be a danger. So what we want is to do activities that pose no threat to our body. Like when we, for example, cross our arms, you don't think that's a great biceps workout. Oh, I can really feel my biceps working. Imagine if you did. Yet, of course, when you bend your elbow, your biceps switches on and off. It doesn't feel tense. What we want is activities that feel like just gentle, active movement. And those will allow you to enter a meditative state. They'll also make your arms stronger and more functional. Yeah. But you have to do them a lot more times. You see, if I'm doing, say, for example, chin up and push up, if I do this, that's like doing a chin up, isn't it? But it doesn't feel stressful. If I do that, that's like doing a push up. I'm using the same muscles. And if I do this, going up and down, it's like doing chin ups and push ups, but it doesn't take any effort. I can do that 1,000 times. It's sustainable. But if I do a push-up or a chin-up, it'll straight away start to feel tense and it becomes unsustainable. So what I'm saying is do exercises, movements, which use your muscles, which will cause length in the muscles and activity in those muscles, but don't feel stretch or tension, and make sure it'll be sustainable. So that's what I mean by effortless. And then at the same, you have to get rid of the mentality of no pain, no gain. It's not how the world works. And then the next step of the meditative stage, after going, it must be an activity, 5 steps of meditation. Number 1 is it must be sustainable. Number 2, it must be engaging. Number 3, it must be effortless. Number 4, it must be calming. It must lead to a net state, which is the features of the parasympathetic nervous system, where you have low heart rate relatively for what you're doing. It must be low minute ventilation. You're not breathing much while doing it. It must also not feel in any way uncomfortable mentally or physically. And so this is giving the parasympathetic nervous system to dominate over the sympathetic. People must understand it's not like when you turn on the sympathetic nervous system, parasympathetic turns off, or vice versa. It's both can be on. But what we want is a net dominance of the parasympathetic one. And that can be done with healthy exercise, healthy movement. And so that's the 4th state. Then the 5th part of the meditation, of the meditative state, that I believe is necessary for true meditation, is it must be invigorating. So that's where I point you back to the yogi, the Tibetan yogi, sitting naked on the hill, because they're naked in the snow, which means their blood is circulating. So if your blood is not circulating, don't call it meditation. Just call it sitting in a room with your legs going numb and your fingers and toes getting cold, probably with your mind getting bored as well. Maybe you're getting some mental benefits and some relaxation from doing that, but it won't invigorate you. So true meditation, as I believe it was taught to real yogis all around the world. I mean, we've heard many stories of indigenous Australians living in the Simpson Desert where the temperature drops to 0 and they sleep like this. They've got good circulation. So it's something which is ubiquitous over the whole world. We call it yoga, but it's in every traditional culture. This ability to meditate in a way where you're doing something which is sustainable, engaging, effortless, calming, and invigorating to the point that blood is flowing. So how could I summarize that? Do something which is fun to do, which is good for your physical body and not going to cause joint strains after a long period of time, but also encourages the movement of good energy and loving information through your body. That would be entering the meditative state. And that's what I think we see when we see elite athletes running or doing any activity that they say is in the zone or in the flow state, where you see them not just doing it for a few seconds, but they're doing it for a long time. Like
and this is going to help us to age healthily and to live a long life, which is what you came back with in the very beginning.
Yes, because you see, there are many studies that say that meditation has hundreds of health benefits. but most people are not going to get them. Why? Because most people don't like the idea of meditation the way it's presented, as sitting on a uncomfortable position like on the floor. Many people don't even realize you could do static meditation sitting on a chair.
Mm.
You know, many people think the meditation, oh, that's that really uncomfortable position. Well, it doesn't have to be. It can be any comfortable position, preferably when your body's lengthened and relaxed. But also it's much easier for especially the Western mentality, which is generally sitting all day in chairs anyway, 5 to 15 hours a day we sit on chairs.
Yeah.
Get up and move. And it's been shown repeatedly that it's possible to enter this meditative state in a dynamic practice.
Yeah. Thank you.
Mm.
Is there anything else that you think would be really important to share?
Look, you know, to maybe know how you can approach this, perhaps,
Yeah.
to approach how you can approach it functionally. And many people, I think, try the 3 most common things you see people trying in the world today, or maybe if I could say 4. 1, people try conventional exercise. And that's probably hyper-stimulating and very stressful for the body, but it's got limited benefits on the musculoskeletal system. You might get a bit stronger, a bit more fit, a bit more flexible, but it's been shown repeatedly that those who spent a lot of time in their earlier years doing extremely intense things physically often suffered on their physical and physiological bodies by the time they're 50 or 60. So that's not maybe the best pathway.
What does that look
And
like,
then
that suffering? What does it look like in the body?
that suffering, well, massive joint pain for many people when they get in their 40s or 50s or 60s. The average orthopedic surgeon will say that when they randomly look at a sample of x-rays of people over the age of 50, they say from the x-ray analysis alone, it looks like 1 in every 2 people of the modern adults over the age of 50 requires double hip replacements. And that's a combination of poor exercise and poor lifestyle.
Yeah.
It results from, you know, sitting on chairs is one of the biggest culprits, but also exercises, which in modern yoga, for example, it's a wrong, I can't say anything is wrong or right, but I think people place an overemphasis on things like folding forward at the hips, forward bends in general, seated meditation, and also pulling up the kneecaps. It over tightens the front of the hip. And the way people sit up straight, and they're told to sit up straight, most people sit up straight by lifting up their tailbone and pulling the top of the hips forward, which actually tightens the front of the hips. And that causes congestion at the front of the hips, and it causes pain. But then other people who do more conventional exercise like hockey, rugby, you know, martial arts, these high impact things cause a lot of, you know, microfractures and problems in the body that might heal if you had a good regenerative system. But what I found in the early years when I wasn't really addressing some of these things in my, say, 20s, was that injuries were not healing as well as I'd hoped by the time I got to my 30s. And so what I needed to address was not how to look after my body, but how to recover when invariably injuries do take place.
Yeah.
And so a healthy immune system, healthy digestive system, and healthy reproductive system are really important to fix up the problems that you get in your life. And so many people, once they have these problems early in life, from accidents, from injuries, just never get to fix them properly.
Yeah.
And so for that, you need healthy physiology. And most people in their early exercise are doing things which are just creating flight or fight.
Yeah.
Because when they're exercising the way they are, it's increased heart rate, increased breathing. The body thinks it's in a state of flight or fight. Your heart rate goes up so fast. And let's face it, is the rest of your life really relaxing?
Yeah.
Or when you turn on the news, do you think love and peace? Or do you think the next terrorist is about to attack, or the next murderer? You know, and does your mortgage make you go into parasympathetic nervous state, or does it make sympathetic nervous? Does your family, your relationships, for most people, that's all sympathetic stress. It's all going to add to the stress in people's life. So what we need, I believe, is posture, movement, breathing, mental control, which will still help your musculoskeletal system to improve, not atrophy, because sitting down doing nothing, you'll atrophy. We need some movement, but it shouldn't be movement that causes overstretch, overtension, overbreathing, or over heart racing. Because if it does, that will overstimulate the sympathetic nervous system and probably tax the joints till they can't be healed. You see, but go the other extreme, because the other extreme is people dominate with, I must do relaxation class, I must do meditation. And they're going to have limited benefits in terms of calming the nervous system, but they're not going to encourage blood flow. They're not going to give you strength and flexibility in your joints either. You see, the two most common meditative relaxing practices in our world today are seated meditation, which, like I said, does have some benefits. But how many hours do you have in the day to look after yourself? So generally, most people have jobs, family, responsibilities. Those who don't are luckier, but in some ways, but they miss out on the benefits of what a family offers, perhaps. But if you only got 1 hour a day, what are you going to do? Spend 1 hour sitting meditation or 1 hour doing some exercise? So people can often choose one or the other. But if you chose just the meditative practice, it's not going to help your joints. It's not going to help blood flow. It might calm your nerves, but it won't even massage your internal organs, because the organs need to be moved as well. And some people adopt the practice they call yin yoga or regenerative yoga. I'm not knocking this practice. It can be a good practice, but it must equally be balanced by a practice which moves. And the problem is often what people do is, because if it's just say what they often call now yin yoga, where you're just in a passive posture, this is no different to someone sitting in meditation. But that passive posture, for many of the ways most people are doing it, is an overstretch of one part of the body. And there's a lot of passive muscle activity and no active muscle. That can cause problems in terms of circulation and joint stability as well. So my feeling is the best practice is a practice which uses muscles to move into poses. So muscles will work on one side of a joint while the other side lengthens and relaxes. This is called active movement. And at the same time, it helps blood flow. But a practice which is what many people do in a modern yoga class is something like modern exercise in the first 2/3 of the practice, and then like relaxation in the last bit. So they're doing what we might call a yang practice for the first hour, and then 15 minutes of yin practice at the end. Let's put it in Sanskrit. We say they're doing a ha practice, a ha practice for the first hour, and then a tata or ta practice for the last 15 minutes, which is like saying yang and yin, is like saying ha and ta, which is hatha yoga. It's only one step better than the person who goes to the gym, does a full workout with weights, runs around on a circuit training till their heart is about to pop. And then for their relaxation, they go home and have a drink and smoke a joint in front of the television. That's their yin. One step better. Do a hatha yoga class in the world today, you get the full power of vinyasa in the first hour, and then a bit of shavasana or seated meditation or yin in the last 15 minutes. This is not hatha yoga. This is haha followed by tata. This is yang followed by yin. To me, real exercise which is going to give you the benefits of yoga and meditation is when you're doing a pseudo-stressful activity but in a relaxing way, or a pseudo-boring activity but in an excitable way, or something which is going to ideally do what I said in the first place, something which is sustainable, engaging, calming, effortless, but moves blood at the same time and moves your joints.
I've learned so much from you just by watching your videos and doing some of your courses. And you've also got your book as well, which explains in more detail every single thing that you've been talking about during this last hour. So if people wanted to get in touch with you, how would they go about getting in touch with you?
Look, I have two main websites that I work from. One is my personal website, and it's under my name, simonborg-olivier.com. And with that, I've got nice resources, lots of free. If people write to that or just go on to subscribe to that, then I can send you a bunch of free links to some practice sequences, things which could help you get into a meditative state, simple, safe, accessible stuff. And I also have a membership site on that where people can ask questions and also get a whole bunch of other practices as well. And I also have yogasynergy.com, which is what I've done with my wonderful business partner, Bianca Matchless, who, like myself, is a long-time yoga practitioner, but we're also exercise-based physiotherapists, which is why I don't like to call what I do just yoga. It's posture, movement, breathing, mental control, the same in many ways as what an experienced physiotherapist will prescribe to people, but with our understanding from not just our science from the West, but also the many wonderful Eastern traditional teachers that have taught us as well. And so with Bianca, we have Yoga Synergy, and it's yogasynergy.com. And we also have a membership site on that where you can get lovely meditative yoga practices, which is a type of practice we've created to be in harmony with the modern body and takes into account the limitations of the modern body. And we have also lots of courses on that, such as therapeutic applications of posture, movement, and breathing. And also the more scientific one, which you mentioned, which is the applied anatomy and physiology of posture, movement, and breathing. And also a lovely course called Yoga Fundamentals, another one called Spinal Movements, which is a really beautiful meditative practice as well, like I've described. So you can go to either of those places, or both if you like, and connect with me that way.
Thank you.
And if I could finish off with a simple practice.
Yes, please.
Maybe a simple practice that people might like to do. And if they want to get the full version of this, please just go to simonborg-olivier.com, subscribe to my newsletter, and I'll send you some sequences like this. I have a YouTube channel as well, which we can link to as well. And the practice is doing things with each of your joints. And so each of the joints is able to do things. Like, for example, your fingers can open and close. But it's better if you make them move one at a time in a fluid way. Your wrists can go back and forth and go side to side, but it's better if you move them through the circular way like this. Your shoulders, maybe the easiest thing to describe is shoulders can go up or down and forward and backward. But it's better if instead of moving in a linear way, you move in a circular way, in a fluid way. And so if you do this, and you really relax while doing it, your spine starts to move as well. And so what I want to get people to practice is in a way where the whole body starts to move in these circular ways. So you could move the fingers at the same time as the shoulders. So my fingers are opening and closing like playing a piano, while my shoulders are rolling. And I'm not moving my shoulders to the point of the limit of my stretch. Like I could move my shoulders really high, but then I feel tense and stretchy. So I could go really low and feel tense and stretchy, but I go maybe only 2/3 of the movement. So I'm moving in a place where I'm still free, where I don't feel tension or stretch. And I'm trying to relax the rest of my body completely. And as I do this, it starts to make blood flow. People will feel their fingers start to get warmer. But as I'm doing it, I'm also exercising muscles, which if you do this 100 times, you'll feel your shoulders have done something. But in that period, you've actually been able to enter a meditative state. This is a very simple exercise. You can make it much more complex. And that's why it's a personal prescription thing. But this is the sort of thing that I can give my grandparents.
Yes.
I can take to people in wheelchairs. And what you focus on in the meditative practice to get it is 3 steps. To get the practice I'm offering as a prescription to you all is 3 steps. Number 1 step is have a purpose. What's the purpose? Well, maybe life has a meaning, and the meaning is to recognize that we're all connected as one, and we should act like that. Therefore, to do it, enjoy your life, look after your body, to be a shining example, and to have the facilities to help other people enjoy their lives and connect with them in that way. That's your purpose. But the initial purpose has to be share good energy and loving information inside yourself, encourage the flow of blood and the dominance of your parasympathetic nervous system inside yourself. That's your number 1 step, your aim. Number 2 step is to stop doing the things that block good energy and loving information inside yourself. And there are 5 things: tension, overstretch or bad posture, overbreathing, overthinking, and overeating. So step 2 is counter that. Tense less, stretch less, breathe less, think less, and eat less, which almost becomes a byproduct of the other ones.
Yeah.
And then step number 3 of this practice, to be able to enter a meditative state that will counter the effects of old age and allow for your longevity, to be able to be childlike and have the energy of a child, the abilities of a child, even when you're 40, 50, 60 years old, perhaps.
Yeah.
Third step is to encourage the flow of good energy and loving information through your body. So for that, there's 4 steps. Number 1 step is move actively into each position you're doing. Don't let yourself, like if you're doing a yoga stretch, for example, don't fall into the stretch. Use your own muscles to come into a stretch. A typical example would be, say, for example, someone who meditates or does yoga and wants to put their legs into lotus posture. They would grab one leg and put it on the other thigh, grab the other leg, put it on. But that's not how traditionally they did it. People in traditional cultures will put their legs into lotus like we cross our arms. So why can't you do that in a yoga practice? Instead of grabbing one foot to put it in the lift your leg up first, at least as far as you can, then maybe help with your arm. Move actively. Use your own muscles. Don't use momentum, gravity, or one limb pulling another. Not in the beginning. Later, you can use it in a more advanced practice. Second step is to move from your core. Don't lock your core like many people do and become tense in your abdomen. Move from your core. So before you bring your hand from one side to the other, move your core the same direction. It means your spine frees up, your internal organs free up, and it's how natural movement is supposed to work. The third thing is breathe naturally. Don't force your breath. Not in the beginning. In the beginning, most people have to realize that if they want supernatural abilities, if they want to heal from old age, then the first step to having a normal life, to having a supernatural life, is to acknowledge that in between the two, between normal and supernatural, is natural. Go back to a more natural life. Move more naturally. Breathe naturally. And that's the best breathing most people can do. I can also teach you very advanced breath techniques, but first master natural breath. And most people have lost it. Natural breathing is inhale low, exhale passive. Breathe through your nose. Don't breathe so much. And then most of the time, just forget the breath and focus on the activity you're doing. Breath happens by itself, like when you're asleep, the most regenerative thing that you do in your life. And then the fourth step, important one, of this entering this meditative state, to encourage the flow of good energy and loving information, is to move fluidly. And fluid movements are not linear. Don't just bring your shoulders up and down, not forward and backward. That's musculoskeletal. Move through all 4 points in a circle. And so the same way that when you drive a car back and forth, or right or left, like me moving my hand up and down or right to left, that's linear. If you drove a car like that, you'd have to accelerate, then brake, accelerate, then brake. And that uses energy, it wastes energy, and it's jarring for your body. But if you drove the car through all 4 points in a circle, you wouldn't have to use your brake or your accelerator. It builds energy. You can feel the energy as you're turning a corner. And when your joints move in circular ways, it also encourages blood flow. And then all you've got to focus on is just relax and enjoy the ride. Free energy from the universe around you. Have the aim, a purpose in life. Share good energy and information with everyone you meet, but start with yourself. Then stop blocking good energy, loving information inside yourself. Tense less, stretch less, breathe less, think less, eat less. Then encourage the flow of good energy and information inside yourself by moving actively, moving from your core, breathing naturally, moving fluidly as your first steps. And if you learn those first steps, then you can take that to any other activity. Modern yoga, dance, martial arts, gymnastics, they all come from those basic first steps. And that's what I share on my websites. And I call it 5-dimensional flow.
Thank you. That was amazing to listen to. I've got one takeaway, my biggest takeaway I've got a lot of takeaways, but my biggest one is finding that space of samadhi and realizing that space of samadhi. That was very rich. Thank you for
Oh, it
sharing
is
with us, Simon.
thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you. And really, I really acknowledge the wonderful work that you're doing. And I could heartily recommend everyone to come to your site and what you're doing and what you're sharing with everyone. So thank you very much for the good work that you're doing. And thank you for sharing this with me today and for inviting me.
Thank you.